Listen, you may have done everything right. You got the degree, you got the good job, you make a decent salary, but still at the end of the month, you're left with nothing. And so you're wondering, if I'm doing everything so right, why does it feel like I'm barely surviving? And here's the thing that we don't talk about enough. You can be making good money and still not be financially stable. You can very well be making $60,000 to $100,000 and still be living paycheck to paycheck. And I know this because before I became the financial educator that you see today, I was living paycheck to paycheck, making $65,000, drowning in student loan debt, unable to consistently save $30 a month, and getting those overdraft fees. So I know exactly how frustrating it is. Now, that was over 14 years ago, and I was able to break the paycheck to paycheck cycle, get out of debt, and eventually start building wealth using the steps that I want to share in this video, starting with the first step, which was getting clear on my numbers. Here's the thing. Men lie, women lie, but numbers do not lie. The truth that my numbers were telling me was that I was broke, to the tune of a negative $80,000 in net worth. In order to figure this out, I use a website that allowed me to put in my bank account, my credit card account, and my student loan accounts, and it was able to calculate that net worth. And as shocking and gut-wrenching as that number was, it was the stark reality of where my finances were at the time and where they would be if I continued down the same path. Now, in addition to calculating my net worth, that website also was able to show me exactly where my money was going every single month based on my checking account. Needless to say, that was very eye-opening, which I'll talk about a little bit later. Now, I know you're going to ask me what was the website, and unfortunately, they were bought out by another company, and I can't vouch for the service right now. However, this is something that you can do on your own. So to get a rough number for your net worth, all you have to do is look at how much cash you have in your bank accounts. And if you have investment accounts, look at the total that you have there. And then how much debt do you have? How much do you have in student loans? What's your car note? What's your mortgage? And then you want to subtract that debt from the cash and the investments that you have. And that's going to tell you what your net worth is. And for a lot of people, that is a negative number. Now, in order to know exactly where your money is going as far as your spending, this is a lot easier because most banks actually have a feature in the online bank accounts that will break down your spending. It will give you a spending report. If your bank account does not have a spending report that will break down your spending into categories like food, transportation, utilities, all those things, you can do this manually by just printing out 3 months worth of your bank statements, going line by line and categorizing where you've spent your money. And this is going to give you a really good picture of where you stand financially and, more importantly, where your money is actually going. You need this foundation and this baseline in order to know exactly what you need to do to make a change. So the goal here is to just know where you stand financially so that you can create a plan going forward. Now, once I knew my numbers, I realized that my income wasn't necessarily the problem. The problem was I just did not know where my money was going. It was going everywhere, which led me to the next step, which was I began budgeting every single dollar. Now, here's the thing about budgeting. I knew I needed to budget. In fact, I had tried budgeting before and it just was confusing. Like it may be to you. It just felt confusing. None of the templates or the examples that I saw made sense to me until I came across the zero-based budgeting method. Once I figured that one out, I knew exactly where my money was going instead of trying to figure out where my money went. Now, with this particular budgeting method, you're going to take your income for that pay period and you're going to list out all of your expenses that you're going to have for that pay period. And you're going to tell every dollar, every cent of your income where it's going for those expenses. It could be bills, it could be paying off debt, it could be putting money in savings. Wherever it's going, you're going to tell that money exactly where it's going, every penny of it. And so when you take the difference between your income and those expenses that you've allocated, is going to be zero, hence the term zero-based budget. Now, I actually have a zero-based budgeting template that you can grab for free. So just scan the QR code or comment template and I will reply back with the link for you to grab it. Nonetheless, what the budget is going to do is allow you to plan where your money is going so that you're not trying to figure out later where it went. But more importantly, it's going to show you if you have enough income to cover your expenses. Now, if you don't have enough income to cover your expenses, then you're going to have to do one or two things. One, you're going to have to reduce your expenses, or two, you're going to have to increase your income. And for me, I did both, which leads to my next step, which is I slashed my expenses. I'm talking about downsizing from a townhome to an apartment, no cable, no hair, no makeup, no eating out. What is a restaurant? Okay. I cut anything that was not absolutely necessary. And this is probably where you're going to start. What are the expenses that you can cut? Can you cut a subscription? Can you stop eating out? Can you carpool to save money on transportation? You need to figure out where you can cut these expenses so that you can get some breathing room so that you're not desperate for the next paycheck to hit. This honestly has to be your we got food at home season, meaning you're going to be planning your food, you're going to be meal prepping, you're going to be cooking so that you can reduce those expenses that come from eating out. Anything that you can do to cut your expenses is what you want to do in this season. Now, here's the thing. All of these expenses aren't going to be permanently cut, but you're going to cut them so that you can get some breathing room, get some money saved, put aside so that you can have a buffer and to give yourself time to increase your income. Once you increase your income, then you may be able to bring some of these expenses back as long as you can comfortably afford them. My goal was to cut as many expenses as possible so that I could free up cash to do this next step, which was pay off debt. Not only did I use the money from cutting my expenses to pay off debt, but I also sold things in my closet on Facebook. I occasionally worked overtime. I used my tax refund, any bonuses that I got. I used any extra income that I could to put to work paying off debt. Because here's the thing, debt is the number one thing that's going to keep you in the cycle of living paycheck to paycheck. So get rid of it. I share my full debt payoff story and exactly what I did in my book, Dump Debt and Build Bank. You can scan the QR code or comment book and I'll send you the link to grab a copy. Nonetheless, I took everything that I had extra to paying off that debt and I eventually paid off my undergraduate student loan and then eventually paid off my graduate student loans. But the name of the game here is to pay off as much debt as possible so that you can get breathing room and break this cycle of paycheck to paycheck living. Of course, a huge part of being able to pay off debt is cutting your expenses, but also, as I mentioned, it was increasing my income. So the next thing that I did was I increased my income. And I'm not just talking about the extra cash from selling items in my closet or working overtime, but I wanted to sustainably increase my income so that I could not only pay off debt, but also build wealth. Now, in order to increase my income, I did a few things. First and foremost, I started applying for other roles within the company that paid more. Secondly, I asked for a raise, and I actually have a video talking all about that I'll link to as well. And then also, and more importantly, I started getting skills and certifications that made me more marketable in the job market so that I could command more. Doing these things are key to getting out of the cycle of living paycheck to paycheck. I know a lot of financial gurus harp on cutting coffee, cutting all the expenses, but in reality, at the end of the day, you're probably going to need to do both. You need to cut those expenses, yes, but you need to sustainably increase your income so that you can actually afford to live. So that means you need to work on gaining skills. You need to ask for that raise. You need to apply for those new positions that pay more, whether it's inside your company or if you got to leave and go somewhere else. At the end of the day, you want to do what you need to do to increase your income sustainably and so that you are not having to go back to that cycle of paycheck to paycheck living. Now, here's the thing. Once you begin increasing your income, you don't want to also start increasing those expenses as well. This is what we call lifestyle creep. Just because you're making more money don't mean you need to start spending more money as well, because that's going to put you back in the cycle of living paycheck to paycheck. So just as much as you have a plan of getting out of the paycheck to paycheck cycle, you also need a plan for managing your money on a consistent basis so that you can remain out of that cycle. And so I want you to check out this next video where I break down exactly how to manage your money month to month so that you can stay out of the cycle.